I'm done with this family, I said, blocking her number. Don't expect my help ever again. My brother stared at me, speechless. We need to talk, he whispered. Hey there. Welcome to today's story. What are you up to? Get ready because you're about to hear something powerful. Today's story is about a person who's had enough and is finally standing up for themselves in a way they never thought possible. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family and your own peace of mind? Where you felt like everything you did for them was never enough, and the moment you said no, everything changed? Stick around until the end to see how this character overcomes it all. And I'd really appreciate it if you could help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you more stories like this one. Thanks so much for being here. The sun was setting over the quaint village of Fireside, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Inside a cozy little house, Maya Stone, a 28-year-old artist, stood frozen at the door. Her hands gripped the handle of a beautiful ceramic vase she'd spent weeks crafting, a gift for her family's reunion dinner. She had no idea what was coming. Maya's heart skipped a beat when her father, James Stone, gave her a cold smile, his eyes filled with a kind of quiet malice. Her younger brother, Aaron, was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, pretending to be too busy to notice the tension. Her mother, Sarah, sat across the room in her armchair, her lips tightly pressed together, avoiding Maya's gaze. And then, her sister, Olivia, standing by the window, eyes gleaming with something that made Maya's stomach twist. Mom, Dad, what's going on? Maya asked, trying to stay calm. I brought you guys a gift. What's with the silence? Let's get straight to the point, James said, his voice colder than the wine he sipped from his glass. We had a family vote. You're not coming with us to Tuscany next month. Maya blinked, unable to process the words. You're joking. No, Maya, Olivia said with a smirk, her arms folded. It's best for the group dynamic. We think it would be better if you just stay home this year. Maya's world shifted beneath her. She had been the one to plan the trip, the one to book the villa, the flights, everything. And now they were throwing her out like an unwanted guest. You're kicking me out of the trip I paid for? Maya's voice trembled, but she refused to let them see how hurt she was. Her father shrugged. We didn't ask you to pay for it. We just thought it'd be better for all of us. Olivia added, You're too uptight, Maya. Last year, you ruined the vibe when you argued with the waiter about a service charge. It's just a little extra money, but you made everyone uncomfortable. Maya's eyes flashed with anger. You mean I pointed out the unfair charge? You're welcome, by the way. Her mother finally spoke up, her voice softer, almost pleading. We just want peace this time. Not more drama, Maya. At that moment, Maya realized that they had planned this together. They had voted her out of her own family vacation. And worst of all, they didn't even have the decency to hide their disdain for her. She took a deep breath and stood taller. You all think I'm the problem, don't you? Fine. But don't expect me to cover your $7,000 trip anymore. She pulled out her phone and blocked the travel account. Good luck figuring it out without me. Maya turned on her heels and walked out, leaving behind a stunned family and the ruins of a relationship she once thought unbreakable. The days after the family's vote were a blur of emotion for Maya. She couldn't seem to escape the feeling of betrayal no matter how hard she tried. Every time she picked up her paintbrush or shaped a new ceramic piece, the weight of what had just happened crashed over her again. It was as if her hands had lost their magic, and the art that once flowed so freely now felt heavy and hollow. Maya was an artist. Creating was her way of speaking when words failed her. But this time, no amount of color on a canvas, no amount of glaze on clay could soothe the ache gnawing at her insides. The phone on her desk buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was a message from Olivia. Don't let this ruin everything. We still love you, you know? Maya stared at the screen, her mind racing. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, sharp and hollow. Love? If this was love, she didn't need it. If this was how family showed love, she was done with it. The message felt like salt in an open wound. A half-hearted attempt to smooth over what had been done. Her sister had voted her out of the family trip, humiliated her, and now was trying to act like nothing had changed? As if a few empty words could undo the damage? Maya threw the phone onto the desk, her fingers trembling as she picked up the clay she was working with. But the rhythm she once found in her craft wasn't there. The pieces weren't coming together. Everything felt off. This wasn't just about a trip to Tuscany. This was about her entire relationship with her family being shattered before her eyes. Her mind flashed back to their words, their looks, the way they dismissed her efforts as if she was nothing more than an inconvenience. She had planned the trip, organized everything, paid for it all out of the goodness of her heart. And they had turned on her, like wolves circling a fallen animal. It wasn't just the trip. It was the years of being the family's doormat. Always the one who gave, always the one who sacrificed, always the one who cleaned up the messes they left behind. She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the memory of her father's cold voice, of Olivia's smirk, of her mother's apologetic tone. She could still hear them in her head, telling her that she was the problem, that she was the one who made everything tense. It stung, like they were rewriting the story of her life and leaving her out of it entirely. And then the bombshell came. Her phone buzzed again. She reached for it, her hands shaky. This time, it was a call from her cousin, Vanessa, the one person in her family she thought she could count on. Vanessa had always been Maya's ally, the one who understood her art, her struggles, her soul. But this call, this conversation would change everything. "Maya, I'm so sorry," Vanessa said, her voice filled with pity, the kind of pity that felt worse than any insult. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" Maya's stomach dropped to the floor. "How did you hear?" She didn't want to ask. She didn't want to know. But she had to. She had to know how far this betrayal had gone. "They posted it on Instagram," Vanessa replied, a hint of discomfort in her voice. Olivia posted a boomerang of wine glasses clinking with the caption, "When the toxic one finally takes herself out. #reunion prep, #narcissist free." Maya's blood ran cold. Her hands went clammy as she clutched the phone tighter, her mind reeling. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Narcissist free? Toxic one? It wasn't enough that they had kicked her out of the trip, now they were publicly mocking her? On social media? Where everyone, family, friends, acquaintances could see it. This wasn't just a betrayal, this was a full-on character assassination. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as her thoughts spiraled. How dare they? How dare they paint her as the villain when she was the one who had given everything? How could they twist the truth so easily, turn the story into something unrecognizable? Maya pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to stave off the headache that was beginning to form. She could feel the pressure of the lie building in her chest, suffocating her. They had plotted this. They used me, took everything I had to offer, and now they were laughing about it. It wasn't just the trip. It was everything. The years of always being the one who gave and never received. The years of being the family's support system only to be discarded when they had no more use for her. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Olivia. "Please, Maya, don't make this worse. We're family." Maya wanted to scream. The hypocrisy was too much. Family? They weren't acting like family. They were acting like strangers who had no idea who she was or what she'd done for them. Her hands were shaking now, but it wasn't from the cold. It was from rage, pure, raw rage that had been building up for years, bubbling just beneath the surface. And now it was all coming out at once. She typed a response, but then stopped. What could she say? What words could possibly explain the hurt, the sense of betrayal? She could feel it, the burning ache in her chest that made it hard to breathe. The people she had trusted most in the world had turned on her, and she didn't even recognize them anymore. They were strangers now, hiding behind their social media facades, pretending to be the perfect family, while in reality, they were just toxic. Maya shut her phone off. She couldn't deal with this anymore. Not right now. Not when she felt like she was drowning in her own emotions. But the truth was, she had never been more awake. The betrayal, the humiliation, the lies, they were all pieces of a puzzle that had finally fallen into place. This wasn't just about a trip. It was about her realizing that she had been giving away pieces of herself for years, pieces that would never be returned. It was about her finally waking up to the truth that she deserved better than this, that she wasn't just some tool for them to use when it was convenient. The next day, Maya decided she was done. Done with the lies. Done with the manipulation. She wasn't going to let them win. She wasn't going to sit in silence while they continued to destroy her. She had been the one to hold everything together for so long, but now it was her turn to break free. As she stood in front of her easel, staring at the canvas in front of her, Maya felt a flicker of hope. She might have lost her family, but she hadn't lost herself. and that was the only thing that mattered now. The pain was still there, deep inside her. But it wasn't going to define her anymore. Maya picked up her paintbrush and began to work. The first stroke was bold, unapologetic. She was done hiding, done being their scapegoat, done being their fall guy. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt free. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story. But before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. Maya didn't sleep that night. The weight of the events kept her wide awake, her body feeling restless and her mind a storm of swirling thoughts. She lay on the bed in her small apartment, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. The silence of the night was suffocating. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, her family, cold and indifferent. Each of them playing their part in this betrayal. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a stark reminder that the world outside hadn't stopped moving while she was trapped in her own grief. She reached over and grabbed it, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the screen. The message was from her mother, and it made her stomach twist in knots. "Please, Maya, don't do this. You're breaking the family apart." Maya's blood boiled. She stared at the words, a bitter laugh escaping her lips as she read them again. Breaking the family apart? Her entire life. She had been the one to hold the pieces of this broken family together. She had been the glue, the one who sacrificed her time, her energy, her money, everything so that they could live comfortably. So that they could pretend everything was fine. And now, after all of it, this was how they repaid her. By using her, exploiting her generosity, and then throwing her away when it was no longer convenient. She felt a surge of anger and betrayal so intense it felt like it might consume her entirely. Maya clenched her fists, the feeling of helplessness choking her. She had always known that her family depended on her, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't dependence, it was exploitation. Unable to stay still, Maya swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat up, her mind racing. She opened the email from the travel agency, the one that confirmed the flight bookings for the entire family. She scanned through it quickly, her pulse quickening with each line she read. And then, there it was. A gut punch that left her breathless. Olivia's flight had been upgraded to business class, using Maya's credit card. Her blood ran cold, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to blur. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, her vision narrowing with the pressure of rising anger. She had trusted them. She had given them everything. And now Olivia, her own sister, had used her credit card without even asking. Had taken advantage of her kindness in the most blatant way possible. She felt like her chest might burst open with how badly she was shaking. Maya grabbed her phone, her hands unsteady as she dialed the airline. Her voice came out low through gritted teeth. "I'd like to cancel all 4 tickets under my name." Her words were measured, but her fury was clear in every syllable. The customer service representative on the other end of the line tried to calm her, but Maya wasn't having any of it. She had been patient long enough. She had played the role of the quiet, generous daughter, the one who cleaned up everyone's messes. But not anymore. The moment the call ended, Maya stood up, her legs feeling like lead, but she knew what she had to do. She wasn't going to let this go. She wasn't going to let them get away with treating her like this. She didn't want to argue. She didn't want to waste any more energy on empty words. She wasn't even sure what she could say to them anymore, but she had to go. She had to confront them face to face, so that they could hear her, so they could see just how badly they had hurt her. An hour later, she was standing in front of her parents' house, the one place she had once called home. Her heart was pounding in her chest, her hands cold with sweat, but she wasn't turning back. Not this time. The door creaked open as she entered, and immediately, the atmosphere in the room hit her like a punch to the gut. Her father, as always, sat in his usual spot, the big leather chair by the window, his eyes buried in a newspaper. He didn't even look up when she walked in. Olivia was sitting next to him, her posture stiff, her face flushed with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. She was waiting for the confrontation, for the storm Maya was about to unleash. Maya stood in the doorway for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. Everything felt wrong. It felt cold. She had poured so much of herself into this family, but all she could feel now was emptiness. She closed the door behind her with a quiet thud, And then, without saying another word, she spoke. "I've canceled your tickets," she said, her voice cold and controlled, though her insides were anything but calm. "The villa's been rebooked by someone else." Tuscany's off the table. Her mother's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't quite find the words. "You can't do that," she finally said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Oh, but I just did," Maya replied, crossing her arms over her chest, her stance firm. Her heart was pounding in her ears, but she refused to let her emotions take over. "Not now. I've been more than generous with you all. And this is how you repay me? By stealing from me?" There was a long silence. The tension in the room was palpable, suffocating. Olivia's eyes widened. And then, before anyone could stop her, she stood up, her face contorting with rage. "You're ruining everything," she spat, her voice sharp like a knife. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't back down. "No, Olivia," she said, her voice gaining strength. "You ruined everything the moment you decided to treat me like a piggy bank. The moment you used my money without asking." Her father's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up, fury flashing in his eyes. "Maya, stop," he shouted, his face reddening. "This is ridiculous." Maya's chest tightened, but she stood her ground. "I'm done," she said, her voice steady, even though inside she felt like she was about to explode. "You wanted peace? Well, you've got it. I'm out." There was another beat of silence, but this time it wasn't one of hesitation, it was one of realization. Maya had made her choice. She had walked into that room to confront them, to make them see the truth, and now she was walking out. There was no turning back. Her mother's face crumpled with the weight of Maya's words, and for the first time, she seemed to look at Maya not as the daughter she could control, but as someone who had finally taken control of her own life. Olivia stood frozen, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. But Maya didn't care anymore. The years of playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the one who gave and gave and gave, those days were over. As she turned and walked out of the room, the door clicked shut behind her, but it wasn't just the door to the house that closed. It was the door to a part of her life that she had outgrown. Maya had spent so long trying to fit into a family that didn't see her. But now she was free. And for the first time in her life, she could finally breathe. The days that followed were eerily quiet. Maya didn't hear from her family. Her phone didn't buzz with guilt-laden messages or calls that had once felt like an incessant barrage. The silence was almost deafening. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt free. At first, the absence of communication felt like a relief, a break from the constant pressure of family obligations, from the silent expectations that she would always be the one to pick up the pieces. For the first time, she wasn't the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who was expected to sacrifice. She could breathe. The weight of being the family's emotional backbone had been crushing, and now it was gone. But as the days went by, the silence began to feel like a vacuum. And Maya realized just how alone she was. The world outside continued to move at its usual pace, while she stood still, her mind trying to catch up with her emotions. There was a sense of emptiness, of grief that no amount of time spent with friends or art could fill. The betrayal, the lies, she couldn't simply let them go. A week later, the storm Maya had been bracing for finally hit. It started with a flurry of messages from extended family. She had been somewhat prepared for this. After all, Olivia's Instagram post had already set things in motion. The moment Olivia's post went live, the ripple effect had been swift. The story of Maya's toxic behavior, as spun by Olivia, had spread like wildfire through the family network, and Maya had become the villain in their narrative. At first, the messages were brief, polite, and seemingly neutral. But then the anger began to rise, like a wave crashing against the shore. "I had no idea you were going through all this," one cousin wrote. "We're here for you, Maya. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." There was sincerity in the words, but also an undertone of surprise, like they hadn't really understood the extent of what had been going on. They were starting to question the narrative they had been fed. But Maya didn't feel a sense of victory. It wasn't enough to just have people apologize now. What hit hardest, though, was the message from Aunt Clara. Aunt Clara had always been someone Maya admired, someone she looked up to for her strength and wisdom. The old woman had never been particularly close with Maya's immediate family, but they shared a bond through their shared love of art and family history. When Aunt Clara's message appeared, Maya's heart dropped into her stomach. The words were brief but packed with emotion. "You did what none of us had the courage to do. You stood up for yourself, and I'm proud of you." Maya's eyes stung as she read those words. It was almost as if the floodgates of emotion had opened all at once. For the first time, someone from the family was telling her that she had done the right thing. For the first time, someone was acknowledging the pain she'd been carrying for so long. She felt her chest tighten, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. It wasn't just about Aunt Clara's approval. It was about realizing that she wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't some misunderstood, isolated figure. Maya had her own voice back, and it was louder than ever. But it wasn't just Aunt Clara's words that started the shift. It was the growing realization that while her immediate family had turned their backs on her, the extended family, the people who had been on the sidelines, were beginning to see the truth. They were starting to understand the depth of the betrayal, and they weren't about to let Maya stand alone. The messages kept coming. Some were more thoughtful than others. A distant cousin, whom Maya hadn't spoken to in years, sent her a long message filled with empathy. "Maya, I know we haven't spoken much, but I've seen how much you've done for this family. I've always admired your strength, and I'm sorry it took this long for me to realize what you've been going through. Please don't let them make you feel less than you are. You're not the villain in this story." Maya sat back, taking in the words. She wasn't the villain. She had been the one to clean up the messes, to take on the responsibility when no one else did. She had been the one who always put others before herself. And yet, they had turned on her without a second thought. The thought was both liberating and painful. It felt like peeling back layers of her life and seeing the raw, exposed truth beneath. But the messages weren't all supportive. Some of her relatives, those who were still loyal to her parents, began to flood her phone with excuses for Olivia's behavior. They called it a misunderstanding, a family squabble. They told her that she should forgive and forget, that the family was more important than any petty dispute. But Maya wasn't interested in those messages anymore. She had seen the truth. Her family wasn't interested in peace. They were interested in maintaining the status quo, in keeping her as the person who always gave. One such message from her uncle read, "Maya, this is getting out of hand. You're causing a rift in the family. It's time to let go of your pride and fix this. Family is everything, remember that." Maya almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Let go of my pride? They had taken everything from her. She wasn't the one who had been prideful. It was them using her as a punching bag to make themselves feel better. She wasn't going to be the family martyr anymore. She wasn't going to be the one to apologize or make things right just because they were uncomfortable with the truth. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it was a message from her friend Laura, who had been her rock throughout all of this. "Maya, I'm proud of you. You've done the hardest thing. You stood up for yourself, and now you're finally free. I know this is hard, but you have to keep moving forward. You've got this." Laura's words hit Maya like a wave of comfort. Laura had been there for her during the darkest days. And this message was a reminder of the strength Maya had been searching for all along. "You've got this." The message from Aunt Clara, the support from the extended family, and the encouragement from Laura. All of these were reminders that Maya wasn't as alone as she had thought. These people saw her. They understood her. They recognized the strength it had taken for her to walk away. For the first time in months, Maya felt like she was taking control of her life again. The pieces were starting to fall into place. She wasn't some broken, discarded person. She wasn't the villain in the story. She was the hero of her own. But there was still a long way to go. The emotional fallout from the family's betrayal wasn't over. Maya still had to face her feelings of anger, hurt, and sadness. But the difference now was that she no longer had to carry the burden alone. The people who mattered were there, ready to support her as she rebuilt her life on her own terms. Maya closed her phone and took a deep breath. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. 2 weeks later, Maya was at the gym trying to find a sense of normalcy in her routine. The rhythmic pounding of her feet on the treadmill helped her drown out the noise in her mind. She focused on her breath, trying to regain control over her emotions. She'd been doing this for a while now, pushing herself harder, getting lost in the repetition, hoping that somehow it would all make sense again. It hadn't, of course. It didn't work like that. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal, those feelings were still there, simmering just beneath the surface. But the gym, the sweat, the burn in her muscles, these things helped, even if just for a moment. As she ran, her mind kept wandering back to the events of the past few weeks. The family fallout had been both quiet and loud at the same time. Olivia had disappeared from Maya's life, but her absence felt like a thunderclap in Maya's world. For days, Maya had been avoiding her phone, avoiding any further confrontation. The silence was deafening, but it also brought a strange peace. Maya was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't notice the phone vibrating in her gym bag. It wasn't until the screen lit up with Aaron's name that she pulled it out. She hesitated for a moment, the last conversation with him still fresh in her mind. She had made her peace with the situation, but Aaron's voice always had a way of cutting through her resolve. She answered the call, not sure what to expect. "Maya?" Aaron's voice was thick with emotion, shaky and strained, as if he'd been holding back for days. "She's breaking down." Maya's stomach tightened. She wasn't sure why, but she had known this was coming. After all, Olivia had always been the emotional center of the family, the one who stirred things up, but also the one who kept everyone connected. Or at least, that was how it used to be. Now, it seemed like that role had shattered. "What's going on?" Maya asked, her voice calm, though she could feel a knot forming in her chest. "She's losing it," Aaron continued, his words spilling out in a rush. "Olivia's been screaming at Mom and Dad. She doesn't know who she is anymore. She's just falling apart." Maya felt a pang of something. Was it pity? Anger? Relief? She wasn't sure. Olivia had caused so much pain. Yet hearing about her breakdown felt almost surreal. Maya had been so focused on her own freedom, her own path to healing, that she hadn't stopped to consider how Olivia might be dealing with the fallout. She knew what it felt like to be crushed under the weight of everything. But she also knew that Olivia had made her choices. She had chosen to betray Maya, to use her, and now she was facing the consequences of those choices. Maya wasn't sure if she felt sympathy anymore. Wasn't this the natural result of what they'd all done to her? Weren't they reaping what they had sown? "I'm done, Aaron," Maya said softly, her words clear and firm. There was no hesitation in her voice. She had made her decision long ago. "I'm free. I'm finally free." She meant it with every fiber of her being. For so long, she had been tied to her family, caught in their expectations and their needs, sacrificing herself to hold everything together. But now she was free. Free from the manipulation, the guilt, the pressure to always be the one to fix things. She wasn't going back. Not for Olivia. Not for anyone. "Maya," Aaron said quietly, his voice a little softer now, "I don't know what to say. I don't know." Maya closed her eyes as she slowed the treadmill, taking a deep breath. She could hear the uncertainty in Aaron's voice, the way he didn't know how to reconcile the situation. For so long, he had been a part of the same toxic cycle. But now, Maya had drawn the line. She wasn't going to participate in this destructive pattern anymore. "I know," Maya said, her voice steady but full of weight. "I'm not asking you to understand, Aaron, but I need you to know that I'm okay. I'm not going back. I can't. I've given everything I can to this family." And she stopped, pausing to collect herself. "They've taken more than they ever gave." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Maya knew Aaron was processing her words. She had been so used to being the strong one, the reliable one, that it was hard for him to understand what it meant for her to step away, to finally say no. After a few moments, Aaron spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just want you to know that I'm here. Even if we don't get along right now, I still care about you. You're my sister." Maya felt the emotion rise in her chest. There was a tenderness in his words that she hadn't expected, something genuine that made her ache with the complexities of their bond. Despite everything, despite the rift, there was still love. And that was enough. "I know," Maya replied softly. "I know." She hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, staring at the gym floor. The weight of the decision she had made, the reality of it, was still settling in. She was free, finally free from the toxic grip of a family that had always seen her as a tool, as a source of comfort without ever giving anything back. But freedom came with a cost. It came with a new loneliness, a new emptiness that she would have to fill. She had to rebuild not just her life, but her sense of self. She couldn't keep giving herself away. Not anymore. Maya took a deep breath, letting the weight of everything wash over her. This was the turning point. She had done the hardest thing. She had walked away, and now she had to find her way forward. She grabbed her water bottle and wiped the sweat from her forehead, feeling the energy return to her body. She wasn't sure where this new chapter would lead, but for the first time in years, she was in control of the direction. She wasn't being pulled by anyone else's expectations or guilt. Maya left the gym that day with a new sense of purpose, her steps lighter than they'd been in a long time. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when the loneliness would try to creep back in. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to face it, ready to build the life she deserved. A life where she could be herself without apologies. She was free. Months passed. It felt like time had slowed down for Maya, allowing her to breathe, to rediscover parts of herself that had been buried under layers of obligation and sacrifice for so long. She moved into a new apartment, one that truly felt like hers for the first time. There were no old memories haunting the walls, no past relationships clinging to the corners. This was her space, her sanctuary. A place where she could be herself, where she could think, feel, and create without anyone else's expectations weighing her down. The apartment was small but cozy. The walls were painted in soft hues of light blue and white, reflecting the calm she had craved for so long. Maya made sure to fill it with things she loved: art supplies, books, plants, and a few scattered pieces of furniture that made the space feel like a reflection of her inner self. It wasn't extravagant or showy, but it was hers and it felt right. For the first time in years, she wasn't trying to please anyone else. She was creating a life that felt authentic. She threw herself into her art. The work came more freely now, like a dam had finally broken. Her hands moved with confidence, each stroke of paint or twist of clay reflecting the newfound freedom she had reclaimed. She wasn't creating to please or to fix things anymore. She was creating for herself because it was part of who she was, part of how she processed the world around her. Maya's career also began to flourish. She started to take on more significant projects, booking exhibitions, and collaborating with other artists who shared her passion for creative expression. She was no longer the background figure, the one who always cleaned up others' messes. She had become someone who was respected for her work, not just for what she could do for others. But more than anything, Maya focused on herself. She learned how to prioritize her own well-being, something she had never done before. She joined a meditation group and started attending yoga classes, practicing mindfulness. She rediscovered hobbies she had forgotten, like hiking in the mountains and reading novels late into the night. There was a newfound peace in her life, and she was soaking it all in. She traveled too, exploring places she had always wanted to visit. It wasn't about escaping her life anymore. It was about exploring it. She went to small coastal towns, wandered through art galleries in bustling cities, and sat by lakesides where the only sound was the wind rustling the leaves. These journeys weren't just about discovering new places. They were about discovering new aspects of herself. Through all of it, she realized how much she had been shaped by the constraints of her past, the expectations, the guilt, the constant need to be everything for everyone. Now she was free of all that. The weight had been lifted and she could finally stand tall on her own. It was during one of these peaceful moments, sitting by a window in her apartment watching the rain fall outside, that Maya received the letter. She hadn't expected it. In fact, she hadn't thought about Olivia much in the last few months, as she'd been busy rebuilding her life. But there it was in her mailbox, an envelope with her sister's name scrawled across it. The handwriting was shaky, not at all like Olivia's usual confident script. It was a letter, an apology. Maya tore open the envelope with a mixture of curiosity and caution, and as she unfolded the letter, her eyes immediately went to the check attached inside. $7,000. The letter itself was filled with familiar words, apologies, regrets, and attempts at justification. Olivia wrote about how much she missed Maya, how things had fallen apart, and how she hoped that this money would help rebuild what they had lost. The message was laced with guilt, as if she were offering the check as a means to buy back Maya's forgiveness, to make everything right again. Maya stared at the check for what felt like an eternity. Her thoughts raced. She didn't need the money. She didn't need any of it. What she needed was peace. She needed her sister to understand the depth of her hurt, not through money or grand gestures, but through real accountability, through facing the truth of what had happened. Olivia's apology, though well-intentioned, felt hollow. It was a desperate attempt to repair a broken relationship without confronting the real issue, the betrayal, the manipulation, the years of Maya being treated like a tool for the family's convenience. The money was just a band-aid over a much deeper wound. Maya could feel the anger rising in her chest. She could feel the temptation to pick up the phone and call Olivia, to tell her everything she had been holding in all these months. But no, that wasn't the answer anymore. Maya had learned a hard lesson over the last few months. Freedom didn't come from fixing relationships that were broken beyond repair. It came from knowing when to walk away and when to let go. She had already given too much of herself, and she wasn't going to give any more. With a deep breath, she stood up, took the check in her hands, and walked over to her desk. She stared at the check for a moment longer, thinking about all the years she had spent sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of her family. But now that chapter was closed. She wasn't the same person she had been before. Maya carefully wrote a brief note and attached it to the check. "You can't buy peace with money." She sealed the envelope and addressed it, her heart surprisingly calm. There was no anger in her, no bitterness, just a quiet, resolute sense of finality. She wasn't angry with Olivia. She was just done. Done with the past. Done with the lies, done with being used. She mailed the check back to Olivia without a second thought. That was it. No more. Sitting down at her desk, Maya felt a deep sense of release. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely at peace. She wasn't bound by her family's expectations anymore. She wasn't held hostage by guilt or the fear of disappointing them. She had learned the hardest lesson of all: true freedom comes when you stop letting others define your worth. Maya leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet wash over her. She was free. She was finally free. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, or any feedback you have. Drop a comment below and let me know how this story resonated with you. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you can be the first to hear the next exciting story. Your support means everything, and I'm so grateful for each of you. Thanks so much for sticking around and listening to the whole story. Take care and see you next time.